Hey you guys, it's your girl T. So I want to come on here and talk about something that's very serious and very near and dear to my heart. It literally changed my childhood innocence. Anybody from Minnesota will understand this video 110%. So over the weekend, Jacob Wetterling was trending. And when I seen his name trending, I was in shock because I'm like, you know, it's been like 26 years. Did they find him? Was he locked in the basement like those girls in Ohio? And then when I clicked on the trending topic, they're saying that his body may have been found, that, you know, the potential killer may have confessed. They're waiting for DNA evidence. It's like my heart sunk and my spirit took me back to when I was like this little 7-year-old kid who first heard about the whole Jacob Wetterling situation. Back when Jacob Wetterling went missing, it took place in St. Joseph, Minnesota. Jacob Wetterling at the time was a 12-year-old kid. He was out with his brother and his brother's best friend. They were riding their bikes to Tom Thumb to go get a movie. And basically on the way back from the video store, a masked gunman walked up to them. He told the other two boys to leave and he took Jacob and he put him in the car, and nobody ever saw or heard from Jacob Wetterling again. When I tell you this changed the landscape in Minnesota, this changed childhood innocence. You know, up until then, we could like literally run the streets. I was living in like Richfield at the time. So, and I remember back then, we could be out all times of night. You know, we would ride our bikes everywhere. Like there are places that my mom has no idea. Like we would literally ride our bikes all over Richfield. We'd tell our mom, oh, we're just gonna ride to the end of the block, and we'd be gone for hours. But that's how it was when we were kids. You know, we didn't have PlayStation, we didn't have Xbox. We went outside and we investigated, we roamed, and we went in people's, you know, yards, and we picked their flowers and ran off, and you know, we did all types of stuff. You know, we would go into people's houses and you know, drink sodas with them, and you know, chop it up and eat cookies. You know, strangers. You know, like we just didn't know any better back then, and you know, parents just thought things were okay. There was not kidnapping, there was no missing children. And when Jacob Wetterling went missing, it was a wrap. You know, it almost reminded me of that scene from East Bayou when the auntie had some type of premonition that one of the kids might get hurt. So the mother made the kids stay in half that summer until another kid got hurt. And then they realized that it wasn't, you know, the premonition wasn't about them.
What is it now?
She may be crazy, but them visions always come true.
It was kind of like that. After that, everybody was scared because day and night, it was nothing but coverage about Jacob Wetterling, searches. I'm talking about for 2 years straight. You just heard about this. You saw Patty Wetterling. Like, I feel like I personally know this woman. We saw her on the news so much throughout my childhood. You know, just keeping hope for Jacob and hoping that someday he comes back, and prayer vigils and his classmates, you know, on television crying, and his teachers. And I mean, it was just crazy. You know, like I said, it changed everybody's innocence. And that's when we realized that there were evil people out there. There were kidnappers. There were people who would take you from your parents and you would never see your parents again. And then after that, we started seeing, like, you know, missing kid flyers. And then Patty Wetterling, along with John Walsh, they started the National Organization for Missing and Exploited Kids. Patty Wetterling is also the one who pushed and urged Congress to make people register as sex offenders. Before then, you had no idea if your neighbor was a sex offender. You had no idea how many sex offenders lived around you. You know what I'm saying? But Patty Wetterling pushed that, and that's why we have a sex offenders list till this day. It's because of this woman's due diligence. She took her tragedy with her son missing and not knowing what happened to him all these years, and she went out her way to help other people's children who are missing and exploited.
Across the years, Patty has found her voice and her mission to find Jacob and help protect other children.
A lot of people ask, you know, how do you do it? And it's like, how can I not? And every parent knows you would do anything for your children, and our anything got to be a little bit more than we ever would have dreamed, but you continue.
Patty has started a foundation in Jacob's name, and 15 years ago helped pass a bill that requires states to implement sex offender registries. Patty works closely with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
You know, so I do nothing but tip my hat. My heart definitely goes out to Patty Wetterling, her husband, their family, Jacob's brother. I remember when Jacob was supposed to graduate in 1996, they even had a special for him in Minnesota. And I think at that point it had been about 10 years. And they did a special where they went to go talk to Patty. They went to go talk to his classmates that were in his class, that were in his junior high at that time, and that they were supposed to be graduating with him. And they did like a little celebration for Jacob. You know what I'm saying? They kind of made him like an honorary graduate. So this is a story that has like followed us over the years. Like I said, if you're from Minnesota and you hear that name Jacob Wetterling, it still brings me chills to this day. Like I'm like shaking just thinking about what happened to this young boy, because we had no idea. But his disappearance like literally just changed my life. Like it literally crushed my childhood innocence, because before Jacob Wetterling, I thought everybody was good. I thought people loved children, you know, we're just innocent kids, and you just assume that people are nice. And then to find out what this monster, what this killer did to Jacob, to find out what happened to him, how he spent his final moments, like it made me cry. Like I was just like, wow, you know, this is a 11-year-old child. He's a baby. And, you know, I see where I'm at from, you know, way back then to where I'm at now. Imagine where he could have been had he been given the chance to live his life. The man who finally admitted after 26 years of killing Jacob Wetterling, his name is Danny Heinrich. And the reason why he was caught is because he was caught up in a pornography sting where they found all types of children's pornography on his computer. And so they basically given him 20 years for child pornography if he would speak out about the whole Jacob Wetterling case, because they had a feeling that this man is the one who did it. He lived in that area as Jacob. And then there was another boy who had gotten kidnapped, but he wasn't killed a few months before Jacob. And then also they have been looking at him as recently as October of 2015. So they've been tying this man. They've been watching this man over the years. And so part of the plea bargain is that he would get 20 years for the child pornography case, but he would not be charged for killing Jacob Wetterling. So it's almost like a slap in the face, but I understand why the prosecutors did it, because at this point in time, the family and all of us Minnesotans, we just want to know what the heck happened to Jacob Wetterling, okay?
Now, Jacob Wetterling's killer comes forward, bringing answers to Minnesota's most famous mystery.
My whole name is Jacob Irvin Wetterling.
Because for us, Jacob was alive until we found him.
What did I do wrong? An innocent child's words as a stranger abducts him.
I want to say, Jacob, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly painful.
A case that changed the way kids grow up.
His legacy will go on.
And the road to healing after decades of waiting to bring Jacob home. Good evening. The faceless kidnapper who haunted Minnesotans for a generation unmasked himself in court today. A stranger grabbed 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling as he biked home with his brother and best friend in 1989. What happened that October night in St. Joseph remained one of the state's most puzzling mysteries until now. In a courtroom confession, 53-year-old Danny Heinrich revealed he's the one law enforcement hunted all these years. Heinrich admitted to kidnapping, molesting, and killing Wetterling near a gravel pit outside of Paynesville.
I want to say, Jacob, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly painful to know his last days, last hours, last minutes.
In our team coverage tonight, Jennifer Merrily shares words from the Wetterlings. Kate Raditz is in Jacob's hometown, and Susan Elizabeth Littlefield explains how a kidnapping survivor helped solve this case. But we start with WCCO's Esme Murphy and the horrifying answer to the question that we've waited so long to hear. What happened to Jacob? Esme?
Well, Amelia, after signing his plea deal in court and being sworn in, Danny Heinrich, in a strong and matter-of-fact tone, recounted the devastating details of Jacob Wetterling's last hours. It was just after 8 p.m. on a now infamous St. Joseph Road that Danny Heinrich, then 26, was driving his Ford EXP sedan when he saw 3 boys pass him on bikes. He pulled into a driveway and waited for them to return. He then put on his mask, grabbed a gun, jumped out of the darkness, and ordered them to the ground. He testified he grabbed Jacob and threatened to kill Jacob's brother Trevor and best friend Aaron Larson.
He grabbed Jacob and then he told me to run as fast as I could into the woods or else he'd shoot.
Heinrich said he then handcuffed Jacob's hands behind his back and forced him into the front seat. Jacob asked, "What did I do wrong?" Heinrich then drove Jacob for about 45 minutes from St. Joseph onto Interstate 94, heading west 15 miles to Albany. He then drove him 30 miles south on country roads towards his own hometown of Paynesville. 2 miles east of Paynesville, off of what was then State Highway 23, he stopped at what was back then a gravel pit. He then had Jacob strip, and he molested him. A half hour later, Jacob said he was cold. Heinrich allowed Jacob to dress and told him, "Don't cry." Then Heinrich, who had a portable scanner in his car, began to hear police activity nearby. The search for Jacob was underway. Heinrich said, "I panicked. I pulled the revolver out of my pocket. I told Jacob to turn around. I told him I had to go to the bathroom." He testified he then shot Jacob in the back of the head. After the first shot, Jacob was still standing. He fired again, and Jacob collapsed. Heinrich then left the body, returning later that night to bury the remains. A year later, Danny Heinrich returned to the site and saw Jacob's clothing was visible. He then dug up the remains and moved them about a mile to a farm outside Paynesville. There he buried Jacob a second time.
Now, I mentioned the first thing Danny Heinrich did today in court was sign a plea deal. He agreed to plead guilty to one count of receiving child pornography in exchange for his confession. He'll be sentenced to the maximum of 20 years in prison in November.
And Esme, a lot of people are really angry that Heinrich is only getting 20 years and the fact that he's not facing murder charges.
There's a lot of reaction to that, Amelia. It's important, I think, to remember this is a plea agreement that the Wetterling family agreed to. And remember, when they agreed to it just last week, they were hoping to get the answer to what they have wanted to know for almost 27 years, what happened to Jacob. Most people associated with this case believe that without this deal, the answer, as horrible as it has turned out to be, would never have been known.
All right. Thank you, Esme.
So the whole situation is sad, and when I tell you, that was just some of the most heartbreaking news, to know that this young boy died all those years ago, and literally this family had no idea. Nobody knew what happened to Jacob. We just know that he went missing, and that was it. You know, while I'm happy that Patty finally has some type of closure, I feel so bad for her because I just couldn't imagine what she's going through. She recently spoke to the news here in Minnesota. I want you guys to go ahead and check out this clip of her speaking about, you know, everything that's gone on in the past 72 hours. Check this out. I'm going to come back with the rest of my commentary.
What I really wanted to say today is about Jacob. He's taught us all how to live, how to love, how to be fair, how to be kind. He speaks to the world that he knew, that we all believe in, and it is a world that's worth fighting for. His legacy will go on. I want to say, Jacob, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly painful to know his last days, last hours, last minutes. I couldn't do this without my family. I'm proud. I'm so proud of the lives that they've built and the happiness they've found, and the children and grandchildren that we so enjoy. And that is the world. That is what gets us up in the morning. That is the hope. That is Jacob's hope. That is what we're going to continue to do. I also want to say one huge shout out to Jared and Joy. Jared had the courage to stand up and say, this happened to me, and there are others, and they found the others, and they talked to those others, and many of them will never get that full confession. And maybe it was Heinrich, maybe it was somebody else, but we know he had other victims. But they deserve so much credit for stirring this pot until he was willing to talk. Thank you. We love you, Jacob. We will continue to fight. Our hearts are hurting. We will try and pull. I would love to talk to you all. I'm just not ready yet, because for us, Jacob was alive until we found him. We need to heal, and we will speak with you. There's a lot of lessons learned, and there's a lot more work to do to protect all of our world's children. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
All right, so you guys just saw what Patty Wetterling had to say. So like I said, the whole situation is just really, really sad. And my heart goes out to not only her, but the entire family, their entire community, you know, everybody, because this story really affected everyone throughout the state of Minnesota, throughout the country. And, you know, I just have to give my props to Patty Wetterling, because she could have made this situation make her bitter, make her angry, make her suicidal. But instead, she took that pain and she decided to help other children who might be missing and exploited as well. And because of her efforts, a lot of children have been saved. So this woman is also not only a mother, but she's also a hero. So this entire situation is just very heartbreaking. It's very sad, but I'm glad that we finally have answers to what happened to Jacob Wetterling all those years ago in a small town in Minnesota. So anyways, y'all, let's go ahead and get the discussion popping. Go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on this entire crazy situation concerning Jacob Wetterling and this disgusting human being finally coming out and admitting what he did to Jacob Wetterling. So let's go ahead and get the discussion popping. Go ahead and leave a comment. All right, deuces. Guys, it's your girl T. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share my videos. You can also visit Lovelyti.com to purchase any merchandise. Also, don't forget to click the boxes down below to watch any of my previous videos. Talk to y'all later. Deuces.